Okay, here we go. Shit. Fucking video, man. The videos I do on this channel are stories that I tell that I've never told before to anyone in public, in a public setting. I've told them to my wife in meetings. They're stories of recovery, of 20 years of being in recovery. And even prior to that, what I went through, some stories about what I went through. And so this, I do this all on my own. Like, I set up a set here on my own. I put up lights, the camera, I edit these videos. I do this all 100% by myself. And in a way, it's kind of a metaphor for my recovery of having to sort of pick myself up and get sober, you know. And it is, it was, and it continues to be an extremely challenging thing, you know, to continue to be sober and live a sober life and be in recovery, you know, and practice sobriety. And not only sobriety in terms of, you know, not drinking, but sobriety in terms of my emotional life, sobriety, and you know, doing my best to make good decisions in life, and doing my best to, you know, keep my life together, and to, you know, to practice principles that, you know, allow me to be a good person, a good functioning member of society. This is a story that is about my first time taking LSD. And that was, I chose this story, the LSD stories, because I had a really bad experience with it, and it was at night, because we had taken some LSD pills, or not pills, but back then there were little pieces of paper, tiny little pieces of paper, and we took them probably around 5 o'clock. So it was my best friend from childhood, one of my best friends from childhood, and who has since passed away from drugs and alcohol. He passed away when he was 27, OD'd on crack and heroin. And so, you know, part of this channel is a little bit about kind of in honor of him, you know. He was my really close friend, I mean, best friend really, since 7th grade. And so it was him, and it was another friend of ours, and one more friend. I don't even remember who that friend was, but I remember definitely Steve, and I definitely remember Ernie. And Ernie was the one with the LSD, and we all decided we were going to take it together. So we decided to do 1.5 hits each. I was about 14 at the time. I think I was 13, gonna be 14 soon. I was gonna be 14 in October, and it was the summertime. So, we decided to go ahead and take 1.5 hits each, and we thought that'd be enough for us from what we had learned. And we went ahead and took it, you know, and it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we just kind of, you know, we were smoking a little bit of pot, but not much. We were just kind of hanging out at my house, actually. My mother went to work, and my mother worked nights, so she was leaving for work, and you know, we kind of had my house to ourselves. And so I don't know, around like 6 rolled around, 6:30 rolled around, 7 rolled around, and we weren't really feeling anything. I want to say it's around 6:30 where we were just like, man, it's been an hour and a half. We don't feel anything. this stuff was bunk, you know, this LSD was bunk. And so we had more. We had like another hit to do, like each, and we just, since it was bunk, we just said, hey, what the hell, let's just go ahead and take this other one. So we took that second hit, and we just continued to hang out and at my house, and you know, slowly but quickly it started to kick in. And like, I say slowly because we could kind of feel something was happening, but then all of a sudden at like 8 o'clock, like boom, we are like full on tripping our balls off, like, you know, a full on trip. And we were just like freaking out on each other and on everything. I mean, I remember Ernie like taking a pillow on my couch and like punching it and like crying and like just freaking out, you know. And I remember looking at Steve, and I was like turning, and we were sitting on the couch. Steve and I are just like sitting on the couch, just like not even able to move, and we're just like just tripping. And I look over at Steve and I'm like, what is wrong with Ernie? And then Steve looks at me and is like, I don't know, like what do you think's wrong? Like, and we're both just, all three of us were just like, you know, out. So that continues for a little while. We're just like freaking out and you know, just doing our best to keep ourselves together, I guess. But then I end up turning to Steve and I say, Steve, you have to go. And he is like, what are you talking about? Like, I have to go. You can't be alone. Because Ernie ended up like leaving. Like, Ernie just like took off. So he took off, and Steve and I are at my house, and I was like, I just told him to go too. So he's like, no, you know. And so, but we ended up like kind of getting into a bit of a fight, and he ends up leaving. So then I'm all alone. Not a good thing when you're like tripping hard on acid. So I end up like roaming the streets of my neighborhood. I don't even know what happened with the time, but like it was late. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'm just like roaming the streets of my neighborhood with, I distinctly remember wearing jean cutoff shorts like I'm wearing now, no shoes. I had really long hair, and I was just very high on LSD and roaming the streets and saying, I remember screaming, not screaming, but like yelling really out loud, like, shit, fuck, acid, oh, shit, fuck, acid, oh. May not have been those exact words, but it was something like that. And people heard me, you know. I was, you know, walking the streets of my neighborhood barefoot, you know, looking like a kid high on drugs. I was not even 14, you know. And so someone called the cops, and the next thing I know, and it's this weird thing that I even feel now sometimes, like when like all time it stopped, and like but then it went really fast at the same time. Like time sort of stopped and went really fast. I just remember like being grabbed by the police officers, thrown on the ground, hitting my face on the ground, and getting put in handcuffs, and like them coming around the corner with like siren, and it all happening like really quickly. And the next thing I know, I'm in a hospital bed, I assume. I don't even really remember that well. This is a long time ago. I'm 44. I was, you know, I was 14. So what's that, 24, 30? It's 30 years ago that this happened. And so, so I remember being in some sort of hospital bed and strapped down with my ankles. I was in a, you know, in straps, hospital bed, like, you know, and it started to wear off, like, you know, 4 or 5 in the morning. And I do remember when I was in that hospital bed, they you know, they asked me like, your parents, you know, who are your parents? And I did not want to tell them about my mother. I did not want to tell them like I did not want them to contact my mother because I was just scared shitless of her and scared that she would, you know, just be really upset. So I told them to call my dad instead. And my dad came into that place, and you know, I have a really, even now, have a really rocky relationship with my father. And but I remember when he came in and saw me strapped in like that, and he cried, you know, and he cried, and it was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry before, you know, and I really, like, in a sense, like, cherish that moment now. It was really heartbreaking back then, and I'd never seen him cry before, and he was really crying. I mean, he was sobbing, you know, and came and, like, was holding my hand and my arm, and I was really beat up and dirty, and he was trying to clean me off and stuff. And it was actually a really tender moment, sweet moment, you know, I think, in my life. And at the time, it was sort of a nightmare, though, you know. So it finally wears off completely, and they're able to take my straps off, and you know, my dad took me, you know, from that place, and I ended up never even, like, talking to my mother that day, or really, because the very next day my dad put me on a plane and sent me to El Paso, Texas, to live with my aunt and his sister and their family. And he wanted me just away, you know, and I made up some crazy story that someone had put drugs in my drink at a party, total lie. And, you know, I made that up. And so but he sent me away. He thought I needed to be somewhere, you know, away from the environment that I was in. And I never got to go back to my mother and, you know, apologize, because during that night we destroyed her house. I didn't know this, but we had just put holes in the wall. We had knocked down paint pictures on the wall. We took a bunch of stuff out of the refrigerator and just, like, threw it all over the place. We pretty much trashed her house, you know, and she came home from work that day. She, you know, worked nights and would get home around 4 or 5 in the morning, because we lived in Las Vegas, and she was a dealer, and, you know, I can only imagine how upset she was. And even to this day, we don't really talk about it, and I think we have maybe touched on it once. My memory will need to be jogged, but, you know, it was really sad time in my life, you know, very, very sad, you know, and I think it took many years of being sober and in recovery to have some healing around that situation with my mother. And I ended up coming back from El Paso, and I'll save that story for another video. When I came back, though, I went to her, and I remember walking into the house, and she was in the bathroom getting dressed, and I remember opening the door and seeing her, and she couldn't even, like, look at me. She just, like, turned, just really a very subtle turn, and I just said, I think I said, I'm sorry, and she didn't even really want to see me or look at me. Like, that's how upset she was. So I went and ended up living with my dad after that for a while, and it was a really really hard time, because my dad pretty much put me on lockdown, and he put me on lockdown, and I you know, I ended up running away after being with him for you know, several months. I ran away, and I was on the streets for a little while, not long, maybe a week. but I was stayed at Steve's house. Actually, I stayed at my sister's house, and I was just bouncing around trying to stay wherever I could, like sneaking into Steve's window in the middle of the night, you know. But I finally ended up making it through all of that, and ended up moving back with my mother eventually. So again, another story that I'll save for a different video. But yeah, that's my first time taking LSD.